razzle dazzle, we're the best.
No, the courts aren't on your side, but they're not on the tenant side either.
Jen, like you are independently wealthy when you are naked.
I am over treating property management the same as real estate sales.
I guess I'll lead the witness. I think it's freaking scammy. Welcome to Hold It with PM Jen, the show for real estate investors who buy and hold forever and ever. Amen. Welcome to Hold It with PM Jen, the show for investors who buy and hold forever and ever. I am your host, PM Jen, and today's a very special episode because you're getting to meet my dad, George Rulins. He is with me this summer, working in my company, hanging out with us. He brought my mom to town with him, and I'm making season 2 of the podcast, and we're doing a lot of chatting. And I said, you know what? These conversations belong on the podcast. Thank you for joining me today, Dad.
You're welcome, Jen.
All right. So this is George Rulins. George is from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, just like me. And he just had a birthday, so he just turned 70 years old. And we're going to learn a little bit about Dad's real estate life, what that's been like, and a little bit about what, kind of his time in the real estate market's been. So Dad, I remember you always telling me when you met Mom, you were a young guy, you were just out of kind of high school, and you were working as a electrician, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you were living in the bachelor pad, the quintessential bachelor pad. What was that?
Oh, we found a place that was an old farmhouse, but it was owned by an apartment complex. We were separate from all those modern units, and it was $300 a month. So 2 of my friends and I rented that, and we parted with $100 a month each to make the rent.
And your cost of living was pretty low. If I remember right, when you met Mom, you weren't even using a bank. You were just kind of keeping the paychecks in a drawer.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
And I eventually got into trucking and not having much expense and not much time to spend. I think when I met Mom, I had 13 uncashed paychecks. Of course, I was a young man at the time, and you had paper checks that were uncashed.
Now, you don't remember if those were weekly or bi-weekly checks?
Weekly.
Weekly. So that's about a quarter's worth of paychecks just sitting in the drawer there. All right. So you met Mom and you got a lot more expenses. And what did you guys do for your housing when you got together?
Mom, my wife, while we were dating, she left the farm she grew up on. She was the oldest of 5 girls and got a true mobile home and a true trailer court.
Yeah.
So when we decided to get married about a year and a half later, we took and decided we'll just get rid of the $100 a month farmhouse and we will both live in the mobile home, which was north of Lancaster. And, I don't remember, it was an extremely affordable lot rent. I believe it was under $50 a month, and it was a little single wide trailer. Mm-hmm. And we were happy there, and we were newlyweds. We didn't have kids. And I said, if this trailer was out in the country, I'd stay here for a long time, but I really don't like this trailer court situation. And that's when we decided to start looking.
Yeah. So she owned the trailer, rented the lot. So when she moved on, it was kind of like selling a car. You got to sell the trailer.
Yeah.
And then so what did you find? What did you buy because you're married at this point, right?
We were.
Yeah.
And we were married about a year. And this is about 1980. We hooked up with a realtor in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And the question was, we need to determine how much you have to spend on a house. How much do the 2 of you make together? At the time, my wife, Diana, and I made $35,000 combined. Okay. The realtor said in 1980, you double that. And then remember, I was the single trucker. I had a chance to save $20,000. He said, you add that to the $70,000. So we're at a figure of $90,000. And we went in the car and we drove around Lancaster County in 1980 looking at $90,000 homes. And again, I was a tractor trailer driver and I felt pretty special looking at these nice houses that they told me I could afford. After a while, we found a place. It had a swimming pool in ground, and we decided this was going to be our new home and leave the trailer. We went back to the realtor office, paperwork, and interest was 12%. And they showed me what my payment was going to be on this $90,000 home, and I looked at the realtor and I said, I not only want to live in this house, I want to eat in this house too. And I'm hoping when we have children, we can keep my wife at home with the kids. It shocked us into reality. Remember, we're back in 1980. We're not looking at $90,000 homes. Gosh, we need to look at $30,000 or $35,000 homes. And we started, and we found a nice little 2-bedroom, almost like a cottage. The doorways were so short I had to bend over to get from one room to the next. We just fell in love with it, and we made an offer, and somebody else got it that same day. And we literally cried. That we thought we'll never find a place for $30,000 or $35,000. Well, when I thought about where are we going to live, when I meditated on it, when I thought about it, there's a road in Lancaster, East Lancaster. It's called Millport Road, and for some reason that road always popped into my mind. One weekend I said to Diana, let's get in a car and drive around, but let's go down Millport Road. We did, and we went about a half a mile down, and there was the big white elephant with the for sale sign in the yard. The white elephant was a farmhouse built in 1851, 14 rooms, with an attached 2-story summer kitchen and a detached 2-car barn, shed, etc. And 1 acre of ground. What they did, they took the farmhouse and 1 acre, and then they divided the rest of the farm up into 1 acre lots. Yeah. Now, this monster, old monster, 1851, was for sale for $66,000 in between our 2 price points. But it was already made into a 3-bedroom and a 2-bedroom rental unit. We decided we have no kids, we'll live in the 2-bedroom side, we'll rent the 3-bedroom side out. That's what we did. We bought the place, and the only way we knew to do any work was to do it ourselves. So we completely renovated that 3-bedroom rental side. By that I mean we stripped the old burlap wallpaper, and we painted and we plastered and we did the best that we could on a budget. We didn't know at the time we couldn't write any of our labor off from a tax standpoint. We probably would have been better off if we would have paid skilled help to come in. We didn't know the tax laws at the time. Okay. But we were able to rent that 3-bedroom side out for $400 a month.
Wow.
Our payment on the $66,000 house was approximately $600 a month. That left us a balance of $200 that we had to come up with, and we had a 2-bedroom side and 1 acre of ground. The thing is, when you start doing something in an old home like that, you fix one thing and you discover 3 more. But we worked our way through it. We did not have a property manager for the rental side. I don't even think I knew they existed at the time. Mm-hmm. Why do I need a manager? I'm living right next door in the same building. And we just kind of wung it. Looking back on it, we didn't have a clue what we were doing. I remember thinking I need to put a locking thermostat over there because we have only 1 heating unit for the whole house. The man that came to rent originally with an early family, he was a very nice man from Salt Lake City, Oh, we like to have it cool in our apartment. We want to be able to turn it down. Of course, innocent, naive landlord me, well, I'll take the cover off the thermostat so you can do that. While Mom and I would be over freezing on our side, I'd go over there and it would be like a tropical paradise. So I didn't have the heart to put the lock on, but when he left after about a year, I had to lock up the thermostat. Even though we were winging the landlord part of that, we really only had one incident that bears discussion. Another tenant later on, a middle-aged woman, she was there with her son, and we got a call one day and said that she had been somewhere else and she was on a floor above ground somewhere and she decided to jump. And she survived the fall, but she was in the hospital, and this person came to tell me they had POA to write rent checks. Remember back when you'd write a paper check? And they said she broke both her arms and both her hands in the fall. She wouldn't be able to write a check. But that was really the only thing that we encountered winging it as brand new landlords. Of course, we had taken things on the deal at face value. It was a verbal agreement. The drain field's just fine. Well, it became an Everglades after we started using it. We'll always retain your pull-through driveway, even when we sell the neighboring lot. They sold the neighboring lot, and that new neighbor put 2 big boulders across that pull-through driveway. So as a young man in my early 20s, I learned always get everything in writing.
Yeah, so you guys are newly married. You've got a little bit of cheddar, right, in this, because you had some money saved up, so you were good qualified buyers, you were well employed and everything, and you go from wanting this small house, right? Well, you kind of go from wanting the big fancy house, have a reckoning on that. Then you look at the small modest house, you get outbid on that. And now you look at a 2-unit, a big farmhouse that's 2 units. And did you have any apprehension? You said we were winging it, but did you two sit down and go, what if they don't pay us? What is it like to live next door to tenants? You didn't really think about it.
No.
Yeah.
No,
what
we
did
didn't.
you know about renting before that?
Well, the only thing I knew, I lived at home up through high school and for a little bit after high school, and then I moved into that farmhouse, I said, for $300. And interesting story there. The one fellow who was paying $100 a month, he complained terribly about how expensive it was. The one fellow left, and that left he and I together to split the $300. Now it's up to $150 a month, and he was terribly upset about that. But when we went our separate ways, when I got married, he bought a house, and his payment was $225 a month. And I remember saying to Mom, he thinks $150 is expensive. Imagine $225. He still lives in that house today. So,
and it's of course paid off because that was a million trillion years ago. But yeah, he does still live in that house today. That house owes him nothing. So you guys go in pretty green. Did anybody say, what are you doing? Like, did Mom's dad, did Grandpa have anything to say about, was he encouraging of this, or?
I don't remember my mom or my in-laws saying anything. My in-laws were both entrepreneurial, and I think perhaps they would have been supportive of it. But the fact was, we were looking for a $30,000 home. We stretched it, getting the $66,000, but we ended up with a $200 a month mortgage balance. Of course, there's extra expenses in that.
Yeah. And you were maintaining a bigger property than maybe you were originally intending. And so you took a stretch. That's called house hacking now. So young people call that house hacking. And it either looks like a young couple like you or a young guy buys a big house and kind of rents out the bedrooms, kind of like what Jesse and I were doing back in the beginning in Harrisburg. We would rent out that 3rd bedroom. or you buy a multi-unit and you live in one. And this is really common with our veterans who get good VA loans. That's and they can do up to 4 of those 4-unit jobbers so often before they get partnered and things. Okay, so you're living there, you have the 2 of us, and you start to make a bit more money right now because you're driving, hauling chickens, doing all that. Did it get more comfortable? Because it was about 5 years you lived there, right?
7.
7. So you lived there about 7 years. Did it get more comfortable? Like you bought it, it was a stretch. Did the economics of it get better in that 7 years?
I guess it did. I never really thought too much about it getting better or not. It was just having enough money to make ends meet. And we really didn't have a lot of extra money, but it was working.
Yeah. There's a really fun story about Millport Road before we run off on it. That house set on the outside of a curve, and we had that mailbox there. And I want you to tell them about how we kept losing the mailbox and people were hitting the house and what you did to stop it.
Oh, Jen, I don't want to tell that story, but literally the house was about 6 feet off the curve of a 2-lane country road, but it was right on the outside of a curve. And of course, the 2 mailboxes were right there for our unit and the one next door. And I commented so often that I can't believe somebody hasn't hit them. Well, I was a truck driver, and I got done one day in the morning, and I came back home, and it had snowed, and I saw tire tracks through the snow, not toward the mailbox, but toward that 2-story summer kitchen that again was 150 years old, and it stopped short about a foot from the building, but had the bush was called a yew, Y-E-W, and it had broken that quite a bit. Marks in the pavement or in the grass, a couple empty beer bottles, and 1 full beer bottle with the cap on. I called the township police. He came over, he looked at the ground, he picked up the full beer bottle, and he said, "George, put this in your refrigerator. This is about all you're going to get out of this one." Later, we had, I guess, bad weather, and somebody missed the corner, and sure enough, clipped my little 4x4 wood post off that I had the mailboxes on. I'm like, gosh, I don't have a chrome strip, a headlight ring, nothing. I don't know who did this. That's not going to happen again. So I went down to the farm where I found my wife, and I found a big old metal wagon wheel, and I found a big heavy metal post, and I got the 2 of them welded together to the point it actually took 2 people to set it in the hole, and then a couple 100 pounds of concrete, put the 2 mailboxes on, painted it up. Life was good. Fast forward a number of years, we sold the house to an orthodontist who turned it back into one big house. About 3 years later, I got a letter in the mail, back before email. It was from the orthodontist. He said, "We were in bed the other night. We heard a horrific noise. We went outside. We saw somebody had hit the mailbox post, and then we looked across the street, and there was a car there on its roof." And oh yes, my project worked.
I love that story because you lost a mailbox and you got some tire tracks in the lawn and you flipped a car about it. Well, yeah, I mean, listen.
And he said, and obviously it stopped the car and flipped it over. He goes, "Where did you get the wheel and who welded it for you?" In other words, he wanted to replace it. He also became the orthodontist for PM Jen and her daughter Jess at a later date, and I told him, had I known the future, you'd have paid another 10 grand for that house.
Yeah, had you taken your little 5-year-old and 3-year-old and said, "Listen, I understand you're an orthodontist, you want this house, let's work out something here." Because I do remember having to go to Dr. Long, and we knew he had bought the old house on Millport Road. All right, so it's about 1986 at this point. You've been in the farmhouse about 7 years. Why did you decide to sell that and get something else? What were you aiming to do there? Why a new house?
Hey, it's PM Jen.
That stands for Property Manager, Jen. And if you're in this game to build real wealth that gives your family options, freedom, and security, you're in the right place. I specialize in the hold part of the buy and hold strategy. With over 22 years of experience managing portfolios of 300 to 700 doors, I've seen it all, and I'm not here to sugarcoat it. See, holding real estate is powerful, but it's also gritty, complicated, and full of surprises. And that's why I created Hold It with PM Jen, to give you the real stories, the real advice, and the real strategy you need to hold strong for the next 30, 40, even 50 years. So follow me at Hold It with PM Jen on socials, and let's never sell, okay?
I was trucking, semi-truck, and I was looking for a way to make a living and get out of the truck. And mini storage units were a fairly new concept. If you took Lancaster County, a map, and drew a line horizontally right through Lancaster City, bisecting the county, any existing mini storage at the time was on the north half of the county. There was none on the southern half.
Yeah.
And we were from southern Lancaster County. So we started working with a realtor to look for some commercial ground to build mini storage units on.
So you were going to buy the land and build them. Were you going to build them yourself, or did you have a builder? Did you had that part worked out?
I didn't have anything worked out with a builder, but no, I was not going to build them myself.
I see.
I would have had them built. So
and the idea, just real quick, was you would build these, and then that would become a business that would be your business, and you would no longer truck.
I had this grandiose expectation. Again, I just wanted out of the semi-truck, and I just envisioned myself sitting in a little office all day and people coming in, renting garages, and how much easier it would be, and you could go home at a decent time and get a good night's sleep. That's all I was thinking about.
Well, and you had little kids.
Yep.
Yeah, so the trucking you were doing, I'm sure, was cramping your style.
Sure. And, you know, running all hours of the day and night was not a big deal when you're single. It's not a real big deal when you're newlywed, but when you do start having children, and when you are around the house, you're dead dog tired. So that was the reason I wanted to make a change. So we again hooked up with a realtor to look for some commercial ground. South of Willis Street, there was a very small industrial park, maybe 10 lots, and one had not been developed. It was an acre, and we went to look at that, and we were literally standing there, and he's explaining there's a green belt you can't develop around the lot, and then he goes, but this property right next door, and he points to it, is 5 acres with highway frontage, and it would be perfect. It's flat. The only thing is, there's a house on it. I don't want a house. As a matter of fact, we've been thinking about getting the big old farmhouse refinanced for a better interest rate. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, let's just go look at it. Mm-hmm. Well, we went in this house, this big rancher house, and by our standards, it was pretty nice. It was big. Nobody had ever hung a picture on the wall. Nobody had ever burned the fireplace. They drove their car on cardboard on the garage floor. And it had a 2,000 square foot basement. So I'm like, wow, remember, it's 5 acres, perfect for my mini storage, but it's got a house. That means we're going to have to leave the farmhouse. And it costs more than we were thinking about paying. Mm-hmm. What can I do with this to offset my costs? Well, I can make an apartment down in that basement, build some walls, and we'll make an outside entrance and we'll rent it out. And maybe we would be able to afford this project then. I apologize, I don't remember exactly, but I think we were talking 140 or 150, mm-hmm. 150,000 for the whole place, I think. Mm-hmm. So that was the project. Mom, Diana, Jen's mom, she said, well, She enjoys babies and small children, and she decided I could make a in-home daycare down there.
Because she was watching kids kind of informally since she was staying home with us. She was doing some in-home casual daycare, kind of, yeah.
So to make this new project work, before we ever closed the real estate deal, we went to a township meeting to get a zoning variance for an in-home daycare preschool. A special exemption, I think they called it. So we got granted that, so we sold the big farmhouse and we bought this rancher on 5 acres. We got Mom set up with a daycare business down there. She became licensed for 12 children with 2 adults, and that operated very well for 18 years.
Yeah, the highway frontage worked really well for the sign and for people. It had so we had it was a ranch house, about 2,000 square feet, with an attached 2-car garage. And the unique feature that made the underground so attractive is that we had a basement finished underneath the whole structure. So a really expansive, kind of light and bright basement. And then a detached 2-car garage, which you rented out. 3-car. Oh, that was a 3-car garage. And it was 2 stories, if I remember right. So that property you were monetizing with the daycare, with the garage rental. And then you kind of never got anything off the ground with the rest of the land, right? We never really...
Well, I forgot about the garage rental. First of all, the reason we had this big basement was this huge rancher had been moved. When they made the highway into 4 lanes, most of the houses got moved back to the back road, but for some reason, our house, before we owned it, it got moved about 200 feet back. The owner said, I don't want any part of this house put on loose fill. So the 2-car garage, the breezeway, and the 4-bedroom rancher all had a basement underneath it because it had been moved. Now the 3-car detached garage with an attic above it, having lived in that old farmhouse with the barn and the summer kitchen, I quickly learned you can fill any space you have, and that's kind of a human trait. We fill every square foot available to us with stuff. If I do that to that 3-car garage, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave it empty. I'm going to rent that out. Again, I didn't know what a property manager was, but for 18 years, I got $150 cash rent. That went in my pocket for pocket money, and I didn't fill it up with stuff. And we had a few little episodes, again, no property manager, but nothing serious.
Yeah. Yeah. So the house there in Willis Street, the big house that I remember being raised in, we moved there when I was 5 years old. And, you know, I remember at various points you wanted to do different things, maybe grow Christmas trees on the ground, maybe subdivide it. I remember talk of the storage units. What happened there that kept you from doing anything with those 5 acres?
The original dream of building mini storage got nixed for 2 reasons. One, the property wasn't quite zoned correctly for it. And 2, that lot that we originally were standing on, looking at the 1-acre lot for sale, got sold to someone else, and doggone if they didn't build mini storage on that very lot, which bordered my property. Also nearby, somebody else built mini storage, and it was off to the races. I put that dream to bed, but Diana's business worked very well, the daycare, for 18 years, and we operated at 100% efficiency with 1 employee. That worked out well.
Yeah, I remember you also made money on that house with your little car dealership on the highway there. So whenever somebody wanted to sell a vehicle, what was the offer? What would you do to sell people's stuff?
Well, your uncle had a car sitting in his driveway for a year, and he said, I want to come down and visit. He brought the car down, and put it in our driveway, and we had a lot of traffic. And before he left, he had 2 people that wanted it. So we realized maybe we have something here. So for 18 years, it was the same deal for everybody. I don't care if you have a boat, a camper, a car, a truck. If I sell it, I want $100. I don't care if it sells for $500 or $50,000. I want $100. We sold so much stuff there in 18 years. And I didn't worry about it. I worried if it sat there for more than 2 days, I thought something was wrong.
Yeah. You could sell anything down on the bank there. And, when I think about that, what a different time that was, that we lived in this house. We had a 2-car garage. And I remember the looks of it was a lot of motorheads, I remember, that would rent that garage. They would need a place to work on their cars. Maybe they rented apartments. And so there was these weird looking guys usually coming and going. And then there was always cars and trucks and motorcycles and RVs for sale on the bank. People were coming up. And of course, we were the only house on the highway. So we would get, people coming to the door to use the phone back before cell phones. And so you're raising kids and we're playing, and we kind of were living on a car lot / garage rental place, but it was fine. We were raised around all the different cash flows that were going on. We knew our parents' work. We were in the daycare every day. We knew what was going on that way.
I often think, had we just taken that original $90,000 home for 12% interest and then perhaps bought a new car or 2, how different my life would have been. But because we bought the big old farmhouse and we had half of it work for us, and then we bought the big rancher, we had the basement floor work for us, we had the highway frontage property work, and of course, with tax laws, you can assign a certain percentage of your residence as a business and all the advantages to that.
Yeah, it's a real story of living within your means, and that's in the buy and hold journey. That's a big part of it, right? You have to live within your means because you have to take these investable funds and invest them before you need it. We have to be planning, and that is so important. And so while you were living in the Willow Street house, which so from 86 to about 2003, you did that. So that's about 17 years. You were raising us. I kind of did my whole public school education there. You made a big change about, 4 or 5 years into living in that house, right? Because you got out of the truck.
Right. So, again, you knew I wanted to get out from behind the wheel of the semi-truck, and I successfully did that from about 1986 to 1989, and I became the personnel manager for a trucking company. And I built them from 20 drivers up to 120, and we opened a couple terminals. And I thought it would be just grand to be middle management, have an office with a window, have 8 to 5 hours. And I quickly found out in the middle management, you catch it from the top and you catch it from the bottom, which would be the drivers. And after 3 years, I was extremely burned out. It was a very negative environment. The trucking company operated illegally. I was not comfortable. And in the beginning of 1989, I told Diana, my wife, I can't do this until I'm 65. I paused for a moment and I said, I can't do this till the end of the year. My wife said, you always wanted to go to school. I replied, how can we do that? We haven't saved a nickel since we had kids. About 2 days later, she came back and she said, I've been over the numbers, we can do it. We had $8,000 in savings. I had 1 year college credit, but I would need 3 more to get a degree. So Diana said, with the $8,000, we can buy a very high deductible medical policy for our family in case something catastrophic, and we can buy heating oil for 3 winters so we don't freeze. 1989, Labor Day, I stepped out of the trucking business, a 3-day weekend, and I was a college student. Holy cow. For 17 years, I never read anything other than a newspaper or a logbook.
So you would have been 37-ish years old, 35?
No, I think I was a little younger than that. Right around there.
So you're going to college with
Right.
the 18-year-olds at Millersville University, and you were pursuing an elementary education degree, right?
Yeah, I did the first 2 semesters at the Harrisburg Area Community College Lancaster campus, and then transferred to Millersville for the last 2 years. Elementary education degree. And so it was a very Spartan time for Jen and her sister Jess and Mom and I. Tax time those 3 years, the bottom line was about $8,000 for a family of 4. Yeah. And I literally carried the same $5 bill in my wallet for months and months. Just never bought a pack of gum, never bought a cup of coffee. My full-time job is a student, and I'm going to do the best I can.
Yeah.
And 1993, I graduated from Millersville, and it was extremely competitive back then for teaching. You had multiple universities in the area dumping teaching majors out. It was just a very competitive labor environment. I was very fortunate to secure a teaching position immediately, and I began teaching 5th grade in 1993.
Yeah. So you're teaching school, you've got the house, we've got the daycare, and your kids were 5th and 7th grade at the time. That's what I remember. So you're in the middle of it. You're in the middle of doing it, and the plan then was to teach to 65?
Oh, absolutely. When I made a commitment to get out of trucking, get that college degree, and literally start teaching, I was close to 40 years old. I don't remember the exact age. I was convinced I'd teach until I was 65.
Yeah. So you're in the classroom, we're getting that going. Now your kids have graduated. What I remember from being teenagers is you and Mom talked a lot about the dream of full-timing. You talked about when you retire, we camped a lot. That was what we did for fun. We did a lot of camping, and you said you wanted to kind of full-time camp. You wanted a full-time traveling camp, and that was the big dream. And the way I remember it, so Jessie and I are 2 grades apart. You graduated me off to IUP, and Jessie came 2 years later, and she was in her first semester, her freshman year semester, and you all called and said, well, we used to tell you that we were going to do this when we retire, but it actually turns out we found a motorhome on eBay. I think you found it on eBay, and you were going to go buy it, and you were going to sell everything and go on the road and try it. Tell me about that decision and why you would have been about 45 at that time. This was 2002.
Right. Yeah, these dates aren't exact, folks, but I taught 9 years, 5th grade, and when I was in my early 40s, and my wife's about 2 years my junior. She was in her early 40s. And in 1 year, we had 4 close friends our age pass away. Both kids left the nest then and went to college. And over the period of time of us being married, we had convalesced and lost all parents and grandparents. And we didn't have these ties to our little town that we used to live in. Yeah. And I said, boy, someday we should. But I just really didn't have the intestinal fortitude to do it. So it hung on that back burner, but those 3 pots simmered back there. 4 close friends our age gone, the kids are gone, our parents and grandparents are gone. And then one day, in April of the school year, there was an incident, let me say, that really upset me, and I don't want to go into details on it. And I was extremely mad about it. This was April.
This is like a work-related incident.
It is. It's a work, and it was between the principal and I.
I see.
Completely unfounded in my department. At any rate, that occurred in April. It took me about 3 months or so to turn that ugly day into a blessing in my mind. You know, they give you a little bit of time off in the summer when you teach. It was the first week in July. I looked at the school calendar. It was a piece of paper. It said school started August 23. I put a piece of paper in the typewriter and I turned it down in and I typed 2 sentences. I resigned my position August 22. Thank you for the positive experiences you provided for me, because I was taught to never burn a bridge. I pulled that piece of paper out of the typewriter. Remember how it would roll around that roller? Yeah. I pulled it out, folded it, licked it into an envelope. Remember, no email. And I mailed it off to the principal. That was July. So now I've resigned. My wife has decided that she will eventually close and sell her small daycare preschool, which was not a large asset. September, I found a used motorhome. I'm in eastern Pennsylvania, and this good deal was in Portland, Oregon. It was a used motorhome. It was 5 years old. It was about 39 feet long. I paid $99 and I flew out to Portland. I had never used any camper bigger than a pop-up. I bought this big motorhome. I put my trucker boots on, and 4.5 days later I had finished my 3,000-mile test drive. I had the motorhome back at our home in southern Lancaster County. My wife said, "Don't bring anything home that's blue." It was blue on the outside and blue on the inside. That was September. We sold the house January 13th. By now, dear old Lancaster County has snow and ice. Yeah. We sold the house to my wife's brother. We wanted to leave that day, brand new RVers. It was so much that went on, we just didn't get going. So we waited till January 14th, and we left in our big motorhome in the snow and ice.
And what were you going to do? What was the big plan in January of 2003? You've sold everything, you're unencumbered by all of it, and now you have this motorhome. What did you think was going to happen?
Well, again, we bought a used motorhome. I think this one was approximately $58,000. And looking back on it, I certainly had no idea it would last as long as it did. All I knew was it's January, it's cold, I want to be warm. The only place I know to go is Florida. I had no idea the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. I had no idea the low desert out in the southwestern corner of America. And 𝐼𝐸 Perrault, if you remember him, he had a show on the road. He said, now that the interstate system's finished, you can cross America and not see a thing. Well, that means I must travel 2-lane roads. So we left January 14th in the snow and ice and proceeded toward Florida on 2-lane roads. Remember, we're on a budget. We just quit jobs. I'm 47, Diana's 45. The first night, we parked for free in a Walmart in the snow and ice. The second night, we were further south on that 2-lane road at another Walmart in the snow and ice. The third day, we got far enough south on the 2-lane road, we were out of the snow and ice. And that third night, we pulled into a Walmart. I'm from a little town in southern Lancaster County. If I go to the store, I know somebody. I'm going into these Walmarts. I'm not seeing anybody I know. Yeah. My cell phone, and we only had one between the two of us, I can't use it until 9 p.m. when my free minutes.
Yeah.
I can't talk to anybody. I'm sitting at a Walmart. What the hell have I done?
Yeah.
The fourth night we were in Georgia at a Walmart. There's a club to this day called the 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐬𝐵𝐠. Currently there's about 60,000 of us. There's 19 campgrounds around the country. There's an 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐬𝐵 campground in Bushnell, Florida. Diana said, for our fifth day or fifth night, let's go get a campsite at an 𝐟𝐨𝐵𝐬𝐵 campground. We pulled in that fifth day to register for a campsite, and there's an 𝐟𝐨𝐵𝐬𝐵 tradition that they're all a bunch of huggers. This is before COVID. You'd hug having never seen each other, and the lady in the office gave me a hug 1,000 miles from my little town, and I was feeling better about that. But what were we going to do? I think we bought a campsite for 2 weeks. We had this grandiose plan that if we live real affordably on the road, and maybe we just not do anything for a whole year. That worked out great for about the first 2 weeks.
When you say not do anything, you mean money-making activities.
Not work. We're just gonna take a break like you're on vacation.
Yeah.
Well, that sure is fun when you are working and you get a week off and you get to sit in a lounge chair. But that second week, 47 years old, I'm sitting on a lounge chair under the awning of my motorhome in Florida. I'm like, this is really boring. Yeah. And I'm not going to wait a year to do something. And that's when the whole concept of, they call it work camping, where you either volunteer your time or you work, and you usually get a place to park your RV, and then sometimes it comes with an hourly rate or a salary or something like that.
You're not just buying rentals, you're building a future. One where your time is your own, your family is secure, and your hard work actually means something. That's the real power of buy and hold real estate. But managing those properties yourself, that's how dreams turn into burnout. At One Focus Property Management, we turn rental properties into wealth building machines. Step 1, go to onefocuspm.com. You'll get an inside look at our proven process and free resources built for local investors. Step 2, reach out and we'll build you a custom stabilization plan to take the weight off your shoulders. We've been the market leader for 13 years in Lycoming, Clinton, Northumberland, Montour, and Columbia counties. And we do it all to give you more protection, less work, and absolutely no drama. That's onefocuspm.com. Go check it out.
Okay, so you guys getting involved in the work camping, you did other kinds of work though that suited your lifestyle. I remember there were summer gigs that you would do work camping, but then mom and you would do, you would work at like a hot air balloon festival. You did the windshield repair. So mom had an Amazon business. So lots of what people call side hustles now, you all were learning and doing from other people who were living on the road. And because you were still young and active, you weren't wanting to have a big job and a lot of responsibility, and you didn't want that, but you were cobbling this together. Because I think sometimes when I tell people, oh, when we left the home, my sister and I, in their mid-40s, my parents sold everything and moved into an RV and started a kind of early retirement type of lifestyle, I think the assumption is you must have had a lot of money. And that's just not true. You made calculated decisions to say, well, I'm going to take this chance. And I always explain to people, it involves keeping your expenses really low. It involves making some sacrifices that most people in our modern culture aren't willing to do. They aren't willing to sleep at Walmart parking lots for free versus a site with hookups and lights and everything they're expecting. So I remember you guys were putting these forms of income together, and it was always interesting what you were doing. And then you came to us and said, we're not going to do this life on the land anymore. We're going to go on the water. So what happened next? And that would have been about 2007, 8-ish time.
Yeah, you have to add. Well, Jen explained the first 5 years in the motorhome, and We really didn't have any direction. We wanted to explore. We wanted to try to stay financially neutral. In other words, not use any of the money that we had saved. And we have friends that think we've been on vacation now for a couple decades, and nothing could be further from the truth. I'll share with you the most money I ever made in my life, and I'm 70 years old now, was the last year I taught school, 1993. I made $43,000. All the other years of my life I made less, often considerably less.
Yeah.
But because Diane and I lived within our means and bought within our means, afforded us to do what we did. Now, that first 5 years, we did some campground work camping, and it's minimum wage, and it's a little bit depressing when you takes a week to make what you used to make in a day.
Yeah.
But you know, after a while, if you get your head okay with that, it's really a beautiful thing when you all of a sudden aren't worried so much about making that extra money each year.
Yeah.
But we lived affordably by that. If we were not working, we would dry camp or boondock, and that means you park without any hookups. It doesn't cost you anything. And if you stay in the western half of the United States, there's unlimited drop-dead gorgeous places to park. I remember one time we dry camped to save money for 6 months. We didn't spend any money. This was before LED lighting. This gets into an energy thing, but you have batteries, and I remember saying, you know, we can have the TV on for about an hour and a half yet, and then we're going to have to shut down for the night. Well, pity poor us, but I don't have to get up in the morning and go to Walmart and have some full-time job to pay for stuff that I don't want anymore.
Right. A lot of people talk about living like that, and I don't see a lot of people doing it. So how did you end up on the water?
Yeah. So we work camped at a state park in Florida called John Pennekamp Coral Reef State Park. And we were there for 4 months, of course, living on tires. And we're seeing people living on boats, sailboats and motorboats. Just like we had said 5, 6 years before, wow, someday, someday, someday. Well, we looked at sailboats. We decided that we're both tall and bigger people. We weren't comfortable down below decks. We didn't like looking out through little portholes. We liked a motorboat. We liked what they call the trawler style. You think of a trawler as a fishing boat, but they do make trawlers just for liveaboards. And we decided, well, let's change over to a boat. Well,
Were you just bored?
no, it just seemed interesting. And there's a whole nother chapter here we're not even going to touch on. But I used to spend half my life underwater in various capacities. So scuba diving. So the thought of having a boat and just being with water under you all the time just seemed like Disney World every day to me. So we did find, we went back to our local home area in Lancaster, Pennsylvania for the summer, and I would work for a buddy of mine that had landscaping and excavating, operating equipment, driving dump truck, laboring, etc. And there was a trawler for sale near New York City, about 3-4 hours away. And we went to look at it, and eventually decided we would buy it. And we spent that summer switching things from the motorhome to the boat in hopes that when the summer was over and the weather would start getting chilly, that we would have a boat and be able to motor south where it's warm. We bought a 40-foot trawler, 1987, and We motored it from up around New York City down to the Florida Keys. You don't miss much at 8 miles an hour. And we got down to the Florida Keys, and we were sitting at anchor. That's like dry camping in a motorhome, but when you're sitting at anchor for free, they call that gunk holing, G-U-N-K, gunk holing. So we were gunk holing, and of course you tow a little boat so you can go ashore. Diana said, I'm going to dinghy ashore in the little boat and apply for a job. She came back aboard and she said, I got a position. Well, it was a position with the Friends Group, a nonprofit that serves the marine sanctuary that's the entire Florida Keys, and it was an extremely neat position. She was the only employee of that group. Well, I thought, gosh, I guess it's my turn now. I can't sit here in the boat and watch her go to work every day. I pulled out my CDL and I started transporting medical patients everywhere between Miami and Key West. My office was 42 bridges with a little bit of land in between.
Yeah.
And we were in the Florida Keys living aboard a trawler.
Yeah. I remember you would tell me you would take your dialysis patients down. You like to go down to Key West because then you drop them off at their medical office, and then you'd have to kill time while they got their treatment. And you bragged to me how you would get really great breakfast and newspapers for free at the Holiday Inn Express. And I said, well, you know they know that you're not a guest there. Nope, they have no idea. I said, no, Dad, they know that a man comes in a large medical van 3 times a week and gets free breakfast, and they're just fine with it.
And he comes to Home Depot and gets free coffee at the contractor's counter.
Well, so, we've glossed over here. You hit the road, and so you hit the road in 2003, and that was the January of 2003, and it was like April of 2004, I got my real estate license. I graduated college. I got a job in real estate, and I remember getting that license, and it was freshly mailed from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I feel like Mom called me and said, hey, we feel like we need to buy a house back there. And we want it to be an investment, and you girls can live in it and rent it from us.
All right.
And what do you remember about that? The desire to buy a house.
I remember we sold the big rancher on the 5 acres, and we were out in the motorhome for a year, and we owned no real estate. None. Real estate was appreciating, and all the advantages to owning it, which we learned from the old farmhouse and the rancher. And Jen had finished up college, and to hear Mom's side of it was living in a real dumpy apartment in Harrisburg. And we decided we need some real estate. We haven't owned any for a year, and we will buy a brand new 3-bedroom townhouse. Jen will be able to move out of the dumpy apartment. Jessie, her younger sister, will be graduating. That's 2 in a 3-bedroom townhouse. Girls, remember, our goal is to stay financially neutral through all this. So you keep this brand new 2-bedroom townhouse, even Stephen on money for us, and whatever you do with that 3rd bedroom is your business. And I think that's where Jen first got a little taste of managing a property.
Well, no, because I was managing properties. I was managing properties in the apartment, and I got my real estate license, but that was my first taste of living way below my means, because back then I don't know how people get roommates now, but I was getting roommates on like roommates.com, kind of like a dating site, but for roommates, and you meet all kinds of people and things. And the one really good one, I was so proud to call you because you were always good at making deals. And I said, Dad, I got a roommate. You'll never believe it. And you go, well, what is it? I go, well, it's this traveling businessman from Chicago. He flies in every Monday, goes to his job. He needs a place to sleep Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. After his job on Thursday, he flies back to Chicago. And he wanted, he didn't want to split the utilities, right? He wanted to write me one check. And I think we wanted to charge, truly a third of our rent would have been $300. It was something like that. And then, you add on utilities, and he wanted 2 weeks out. He didn't want to give me 30 days notice. And so I I just got my little brave self together and I said, well, $900 a month. So he paid the whole rent for months. And he really was only there like 4 nights a week. And he was just, he was never there during the day. The worst part about him is he would go out to Applebee's and get to-go food. Like, he must have had a per diem or something. And just the way they pack all that food, our trash was so full of like takeout trash. But anyway, we were house hacking a little bit there. Yeah. And you guys started adding real estate to the equation, right? And that was interesting because you weren't overly aggressive about it. The way you talked about it is still very much the way you and Mom talk about it. You talk about it as a way to stabilize and diversify, and I see it as a way to be aggressive, right? So you guys bought that house, we're living in it, that's working for you. Years later, we did some similar stuff when we made our base up here in Williamsport, and I remember, you guys owned 2 or 3 properties and you had really good coverage on them, meaning you weren't highly in debt. You didn't have a lot of debt on them. And I would always call Mom and say, I know, because health insurance was always something we talked a lot about you guys in the rig. Before you qualified for Medicaid, health insurance and rising health insurance costs was something we were always working on, right? We were always working on balancing your income to that need. And I remember Mom saying at one point, she was kind of talking about how things were changing. And she basically said like $500 more a month would make a big difference. And I said to her, Mom, if you will let me help you buy some more property, you don't have to take money out of your pocket to do it. We'll use the equity in the other properties and I will increase your cash flow. And I showed her on paper how that would work and we did it. And I'm really happy about those. And it's hard to get you guys on board to buy things that need a little bit of work or that aren't new or kind of in really good shape. But that's you?
No.
You want to talk? Okay. Yeah, tell me.
There's a little bit in that story that Jen, I think, is politely leaving out. 13 and a half years ago, George, had a very serious cancer diagnosis. And thanks to John Hopkins and Hershey and the grace of God, I'm here talking to you. This townhouse in Mechanicsburg, if you remember, I always liked to live within my means. We made a real thrust to get that place paid for, and we were successful. I was raised extremely conservative in the financial department, and that was going to be my money tree that I'm going to pick from forever. That townhouse is paid for, and we're just going to rent that out forever. And because of my health history, it became evident that Diana, my wife, had a very strong chance of outliving me. And because she was self-employed, she was fearful of what she would have or what she wouldn't have if I would expire before her. That's when PM Jen stepped in and said, Dad, that paid-for townhouse you can leverage. I literally said to Jen, what does leverage mean, Jen? And she said, you get to buy more real estate and you don't take any money out of your wallet. I said, that means I have to get a mortgage again on that townhouse. She goes, yeah. Oh, I didn't like that. Old-fashioned Dad didn't like that at all. Mom didn't care too much, and she had her own personal needs, and I never really agreed on it. I just kind of gave up.
Yeah.
And what I gave up was arguing against building more real estate into the portfolio. And now, through Jen's insistence, we no longer have the townhouse in Mechanicsburg because it was too far away. Interestingly, when Jen and her sister Jess eventually went their own ways, we were on the road, so we secured a property manager to keep this thing for us, and it was horrific.
Yeah.
We were 3,000 miles from Mechanicsburg, and they didn't care what they did for us because they knew they weren't going to have to see us personally. We got rid of them and got another property manager who actually came with a reference. that was another disaster, to the point we had to go to court to get the keys back. And then Jennifer generously, as she got her business started, although she was 2 hours to the north, she said, I'll take that on. And she took it for a short period of time. But now, through Jen's knowledge and assistance and teaching me what the word leverage meant, we sold that, and we now own 4 homes in the Williamsport area. And when I tell this story out west, everybody gasps because they think it's 4 homes in the Seattle to San Diego corridor. No, they're not $5,000 a month homes, but they're very stable. The market's stable, and it doesn't matter how many miles away I am. I have Jen and Jess and her whole team batting for me. We don't lose any sleep.
Right. Yeah, and the leverage conversation, getting you guys comfortable with debt, because that has always been the objection with you guys. It's, I don't want to have debt. I don't want to have a mortgage. I would prefer to never have that. And that's something that people talk about. But when you're investing as a business, you're leaving out a whole part of it. It's like you said, oh, I'm going to be a landscaper. I'm going to cut grass, but I'm not going to trim bushes, right? You're just leaving out a whole part of it. And you can make money, but it's important to get comfortable with it. And I'll say, frankly, I don't think you guys have ever gotten comfortable with it. I've once in a while gotten you to stretch your wings a little bit with it. And then, you know, maybe I'll dip in a couple years later on the situation. I find out mom secretly paid off mortgages and, you know, you're engaging in your thrifty behavior. But I want you, and I want everybody listening to know, like, and that's okay. If that's going to keep you up at night, if you're going to get ulcers about a mortgage, well, then don't do it. But if you can stomach it and you can do that, it's a really great way to build, you know, for you all. I see real estate playing, because if we look at where you left 25 years ago, when you left, whatever your net worth number is, I know you've grown that significantly in the time since you've been gone. And I think your friends would think you've been in a use up your assets kind of phase, and you haven't been. You've been growing your assets through various means, various sacrifices. And, you know, what's interesting is you've engaged in real estate modestly for how a lot of people do it. And it's within your comfort level. If I had my way, you'd have twice as much at least, you know, but it's okay. We're doing what you want to do and at your pace. And what's been so cool about your real estate that I've benefited from, and I call this, you know, I call it generational wealth, but I'm experimenting with some new words, you know, either empowerment wealth or freedom wealth. When I was managing property, that first property management job, it was a 300 unit community. I worked for a company that hired all the staff and put them on site. So I worked at an apartment community, even though my company didn't own that property, there was an owner of it, and that owner was very unrealistic and demanding. And via my company was essentially abusing us, the on-site staff, the on-site leasing agent and maintenance tech. And I was, you know, 24, 25, something like that. And I knew I was smart. I knew I was good at this, and I knew this wasn't right. And just the education I had from my parents to know I can always feed myself. Like in the worst situation, I know I can go trade my labor for my survival needs. I know I can do that. And at the time I was living in a house you owned. And I remember I called a meeting with my boss, and like, I think my boss's boss, and I don't know where I get off, but I said, exactly, I don't have fuck you money in an account. I said, but I do live in a house that my parents own. I'm not going to be homeless. I'm going to be out of the rain tonight. I can survive on my wits. I don't need this job. I can go get another job, and I refuse to be treated like this. And it was really interesting what ended up happening behind closed doors. Of course, their first reaction was just fire her, get this nonsense girl out of here. But my boss fought for me, and I ended up getting a transfer. So I ended up getting a transfer to another property that was being sold, which set me up with my next boss, which was just, you know, company, which was just great. But over time, same thing. When I started this business and I had a partner, and the time came for me to not have a partner anymore, to be independent. You know, service-based businesses like this don't have collateral, don't have equipment. I needed collateral to make that bank loan work. And luckily, my parents were able to lend me some collateral. Now, we didn't have to change any property hands or anything, but they were able to use the equity in their properties to generously support me in this branch off. And I'm not saying my partner was, the wrong fit for me, but say my partner was, say that was a toxic, bad relationship. How wonderful that the real estate my parents had gave me freedom to where I now live 100% in my passion and purpose in a business that I run with my sister. Like, how great that this business is supporting my parents' dreams. My parents, assets are supporting my dreams. How wonderful. And at the end of the day, none of us are writing checks to the other. You're certainly not paying to keep me living, and I'm not paying to keep you living, but we are interdependent this way. And I think that's really great. And that's a story of working class people using real estate to grow their station in life. You chose to go back to college while raising small children. I remember that. I remember going, hey, everybody else's parents go to work every day. And I was very aware that made us financially strapped. I don't think we felt sacrificed, maybe just the consignment stores, but I remember we got to be with you all summer at the pool because you wanted to study, and I don't know, but you took us to the pool every day. And so those choices that you've made throughout your life are choices I see people making when they're talking about real estate. You say, I'm not going to be in the truck anymore, maybe by the end of this year. I want to make a choice, right? And you try to use real estate then. And then you said, I'm not going to be teaching anymore. And I actually don't want to live in a house anymore. I don't want to be a slave to this. And you changed it. Right now I'm seeing people, so this is 2025, the AI craze is huge. And I was telling you in the car this morning, I have seen 3 to 4 men employed in software, computer programming. And they've said to me this: in 3 to 5 years, AI will have my job. There will be no job. I want you to turn my retirement savings into a cash flow that will replace my job. Now, these are mid-career professionals. They're in their 40s. They have $500,000 little pots of money. And I know you can kind of in your mind go, well, if I can get a 20% cash on cash, I can pull 100 grand a year. Not really true. I am not supporting these gentlemen and walking them off that plank. I don't think that's the right thing for me to be doing with them, but they're panicked and they're looking, it's just a different set of circumstances than what you had, but it's the same thing. I want to change the economics of my life, where the money's coming from, where the money goes, and what options I have in my life. So you're a reluctant real estate investor, despite having done this from your young 20s. And, you did it with a lot less resources back then. I know you and Mom act a lot more scared about real estate now, but maybe because you've heard some things. Maybe you now know what you didn't know before. You know what you didn't know. Tell me about, how do you think about your real estate now? Or do you? You kind of said we don't think about it. Like, do you think about your real estate? Does that,
No, it's completely hands-free because we have our homes managed by one focus. So,
yeah.
It sounds like I'm bragging on my daughter, but it truly is a situation where we sleep fine because we know there's a system in place. If there are, you obviously have to have a unit that's rentable, but you also have to put tenants in there that potentially look like they won't be problems.
Yeah.
So fortunately, we have one focus and we can leave the area and not worry.
So what do you think about this business? So, what's been interesting is you guys have, so you did the boat for several years, then you got back into an RV for another 10 years. So it's been about 23 years. You weren't around on the East Coast much at all. We would see you for a week or so over the holidays, maybe a trip here or there. And we got a call last summer or last fall and you said, hey, we're going to come back to Pennsylvania. We're going to see you guys for the summer. And I remember, back in May or so, maybe April, you said, well, we're looking to work at volunteer for you guys. And I said, great, I've got some tasks that it would be just great. When I suggested them, you said, nope, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for logistics. So mom's been doing work in the office. She's been doing office assistant work, a lot of dealing with the mail and things like that. And dad's been doing logistics. So taking things places, picking things up, checking things out. Volunteer George has been hard at work most days here. What do you think of this business? Because you've known about it, you've heard about it, and you've seen the building, but you've never really been around. What would you say to people about the business?
I'd say bookmark that thought, because we have a chapter in there that I realize we omitted, and it's okay. But we were living on the boat. Remember, 5 years in the first motorhome, and then 5 years on the boat, and then the cancer diagnosis. And we decided, we were in the Florida Keys and just tough to deal with it. So we came back to our home area to deal with that, sold the boat. And when it became obvious that the good Lord said you're going to have a little more time on this planet, having spent some time in a motorhome and on a boat, I said to my wife, well, what's it going to be, wheels or keels? And that was a real short discussion. We decided we'd go back on tires instead of floating around. So I again started looking for a used motorhome, about 5 years old. And the last one I found was 3,000 miles away. And I realized when I was driving back, maybe that wasn't the best decision in the world. So I found a used one this time that was only 1,000 miles away, down on the panhandle of Florida. Of course, we were back in the Harrisburg area at the time, actually living in my daughter Jessie's apartment, and I was convalescing and all from this experience with health. So I said, I'm going to fly down to Pensacola, and I'm going to drive this used motorhome back. And a couple hours later, my youngest daughter, Jess, called and said, Dad, get 2 plane tickets. I want to go with you. Oh. You do? So we flew down, bought it, and then drove back. And I showed her how to spend the night in a Walmart. I showed her how to fuel at a truck stop. And we took her up the Skyline Drive, too, so we could act like tourists a little bit. But this motorhome now, this second one, we've been in approximately 12 or 13 years. And we got in a real rut where we were out west almost completely. We winter in the low desert in Southern California, temperate, very comfortable temperatures. And then in the summer, we would go up to Oregon and volunteer for 12 summers. We did 7 summers in Oregon state parks on the coast, and that's a very pleasant experience where it never gets hot. And the last 5 years, we volunteered near Salem, Oregon at a museum. But as Jen said, sometime last fall, I just got to thinking about it, and I think it's time we go back east. We haven't been across the country on tires. We would fly back east, the girls would fly out, and it would be 3 days or 5 days or 7 days. But we came back east, we got here in May, and we've decided to stay till probably mid-October. And we asked, again, we don't want to sit around under the awning all day. So we asked to volunteer, and it feels so much better volunteering for our daughters than volunteering for a state park or a museum or something like that. And currently I think we're here, about 2.5 months or something like that. And my wife works a couple days a week in the office, and they asked months ago what I wanted to do, and I just jokingly said logistics, hoping maybe she'd produce a big Peterbilt, but that didn't happen. But I am enjoying volunteering and doing a little work on the road for them.
Yeah. So, well, what do you think about the company? From an outsider's perspective, you've heard me say things over the years, but now you're seeing it. You're here. You're in it. You're doing some of the tasks.
I'm embarrassed to say that we really lost track of how our daughters became women. I mean, we got snapshots, lots of phone calls, lots of pictures, videos, the occasional visits, at least once a year. But now just being fully entrenched, not only in their lives, their homes, but their business, you realize what an amazing creation Jen has with One Focus Property Management. And just fortunately, her sister Jessie is competent enough to take the helm of that ship that Jen launched, and then that frees Jen up for projects like talking to Dad on podcasts.
Yeah.
So
poor Jessie has to do all those work orders while we just chat here.
Yeah, and I'm amazed at the scope of things that One Focus deals with, and I only see a small portion. I might get to see 20 properties in a week. Well, where's the other 600? I don't know anything about it. Or I go out and I check on something and I write it up or I report it, but I don't have any input as to how it gets finished or who does that. The scope of the operation is amazing, from office employees that are literally a hemisphere away, and also probably approximately 10 people here locally that do everything from working in the office. It's got a complete staff they call techs who repair apartments, renovate apartments, do everything from unclogging toilets and putting in new doors and everything you can imagine. Keeping the people, make sure they pay their rent on time, and just amazing. And we're very happy to be helping out with it, and we've learned a lot of information since May.
Yeah, you've learned a lot, and you're doing a lot of different tasks. You're trapping animals, so Dad's been the chief groundhog and possum trapper.
Well, being the oldest male in the family, it's my role to provide meat for the family, so I now have 2 groundhogs and 3 possums that I've got in a live trap, and we won't expound on where they went after that.
Yeah, they're on a farm. So you're trapping animals, you're checking for dog poopies, and you're my roadie because I'm doing the speaking tour this year, and so Dad drives me to most every speaking engagement, at least until he rolls out of town, because I would rather not do the driving. That's the thing that I would prefer not to do. I hate doing it. Well, Dad, I appreciate everybody listening. If you've listened this far, I recorded this for you because I think it's interesting to hear somebody from my life, reflecting and learning a little bit more about me, but about how I grew up understanding real estate, which isn't to say that we talked about it a lot, but Dad's journey and the freedom and options is what I want everybody to kind of take from that, is that you are able to change your life. You are able to do things differently if you want, if you're willing to make the sacrifices to do so. And I'm so glad I got to record this, because now I get this conversation with my dad recorded forever and ever. Well, folks, you didn't get video on this one, and I'm so sorry, but definitely enjoy these cocktail party stories that we did record and have some video for you. So check those out on the YouTube. And remember, we are never, ever, ever going to sell. We solve problems. We don't sell them. Until next time, holders. Oh my God, you guys are going to love this. Listen up.
I was helping the company through a crisis years back, and I was a senior volunteer in charge, I think I've named myself. And I was just sitting there, doing a little bit of forensic accounting, trying to triple tie some accounts. And I hear Jen having a really important business call. She was talking to a prospective client or a lawyer or something. And just so matter-of-factly, she goes, well, gotta go see a man about a horse. And I think most people know that means something. And she knew it meant something, but she thought it was just like a quippy little way of saying like, well, gots to go.
Yeah.
Got things to do.
I said it all the time. I thought it was like if I was a man and I had to go see somebody about a horse, I got things to do. I can't stand here jibber jabbering with you all day. I align with that man who has horse business. I have business. And that's what it meant. It meant I gotta get going. You're chatting with you too long.
And it certainly does mean you got to get going. But it means you got to get going.
Yeah, apparently it means you got to take a Dukearoo, and I didn't know
She
that.
hangs up, and I go, you did not. In a place of business, just tell another grown adult who you did not know.
Yeah, and
You
this is
were
what
not-
my face looks like.
And I was like,
Like, what? What are you talking about?
And she said it so much.
Yeah, I did say it a lot. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, and people, upon reflection, people did have a bit of a,
Oh, like you better go.
yeah, like, it was,
Damn, you're trying to get my business and tell me about your shit.
it was so effective at removing myself.
Really. They're like, no, I've been there. Go
But
ahead.
I have got to say this.
Emergency.
I have got to use this every time. There's no better tool in my toolbox to pull out to end a conversation than, well, gotta go.
Yeah.
See a man about a horse.
Yeah.
And they were just caught so off guard. They're
would
like,
just-
please, please. Oh, I'm so. They're apologizing to you.
And I would say it like, gotta go see a man about a horse. Like, I would say it so confidently. Like I got more appointments, man. Busy profesh. Gots to go.
You know what's better than building generational wealth? Not a damn thing. And obviously the best way to do that is through buy and hold real estate. But managing your properties yourself, that's a one-way ticket to burnout. This is supposed to be an investment, not a burden. At One Focus Property Management, we don't just manage your rentals. We make buy and hold investment really work. First, get on over to onefocuspm.com. You'll get an inside look at our proven process, plus a ton of free resources for local investors. Then reach out to us so we can build a custom stabilization plan just for your property. We're the biggest, baddest property management team in Lycoming, Clinton, Northumberland, Montour, and Columbia counties. And we're here to give you more protection, less work, and no drama. That's onefocuspm.com.